Hello and welcome to Islanders Anxiety from Lighthouse Hockey and the Fans First Sports Network. My name is Dan Saracini. Joining me on this Sunday afternoon by Zencaster is my good friend Michael Lieboff. And Mike, we have a lot to get to in this episode, but I want to start with a central question. Are the Islanders back? What did we watch this week? What happened? I don't know what this is going to be a very different episode than the last one. Are they back? What's going on?
Yeah, I've been looking forward to this episode more than any other, maybe this entire season. I'm trying to think if there was another time where I was more amped up to come and talk about the Islanders, and I think most people who watched the game on Saturday, or even if you just saw what happened, are going to be eager to talk about the Islanders on Monday morning and get ready for what is going to be a big week. They've got a bunch of winnable games and the trade deadline on Friday. So the timing of this unexpected bounce back, it couldn't have been better. And just for your fan life, right? Like right before the trade deadline, not going to be one of these teams where people are wondering, oh, what are the Islanders going to do with their veteran players, etc. Now it's like, wow, like the Islanders can go in a million different directions. All of a sudden it's fun again. And I think that's not just all of a sudden it's fun again is is kind of like a catch-all phrase for this entire week, because last week we considered this season a potential colossal waste of time. And to get rescued from those depths of despair, now it's like, where did this come from? and I've said this a million times on this podcast, but one thing I always do is take a moment after whether it's a losing streak or a terrible loss or whatever is happening, and at the what you think might be the rock bottom of the season. I always try to take at least a second just to feel present and be like, okay, if you're going to be this low and this sad about the Islanders at the lowest point, you better be, the equal to that at the highest points or at the good points. So, as down as it's been for the past couple of weeks, with the team trending in the right direction, you owe it to yourself as a fan to lean into it, to lean into the fun, and it could get even more fun these next few games, hopefully. So at the risk of putting the cart before the horse here, I'm as excited to watch Islander hockey as I've been perhaps since opening night of the season, or maybe since like Patrick Waugh's first game. But there have been very few weeks of Islander hockey I've been looking forward to more than this one coming up.
Yeah, for sure. And you mentioned the trade deadline, which is a big part of that. We're going to talk all about that in the second half. But yeah, this is going to be a wild one. When we last spoke, they were coming off of that disastrous outdoor game, kind of, another blown lead, but an overtime win in Pittsburgh, and then two complete like face plants against the Blues and Lightning. And here we're talking about 3 straight wins, a chance at even more as the Western Conference road trip or the California road trip comes up. We're going to talk a lot about that too in the second half. Reminder that we are on Patreon at patreon.com/Islanders Anxiety. Plan starts those $2 a month, ad-free episodes, bonus stuff, the whole thing. We're going to have a bunch of announcements later on you'll want to pay attention to as well. But yeah, so let's get into the games. And I want to do something different. I want to talk about Saturday night's game first. I was out, but I ended up catching the replay this morning. It was a 5-1 win over the Bruins. It was, the Bruins had been struggling a little bit, but I mean, they're a team that certainly has had the Islanders number in the regular season, going back decades, it seems. And like I said, I was out. I was watching Batman in concert over here at the New Jersey Performing Arts Center, the 35th anniversary of the 89 Batman movie. And before the show even started, I looked at my phone and it was 2-0 Islanders and 2 goals by Kyle Palmieri. And I was like, wow, how about that? He ended up having a hat trick, 4-point natural hat trick, 4 points, the fastest hat trick to start a game in Islanders history, which is crazy. It had been 11 years since his last natural hat trick. The only guy who went longer than that between them was Gordie Howe, which is another kind of just a weird stat. And they ended up piling on. They were up 5-0 at one point. Bruins got one back. But I was actually more interested in watching the third period because I was almost more fascinated by the fact that they didn't give up anything in that period and blow the lead than I was in Palmieri getting a hat trick. To you, well, first of all, were you there? Oh no, you weren't there, right? No, I don't think you were there.
I was there.
Oh, you were. Oh, okay. Well, then number one, well, what was that atmosphere like? And two, I mean, watching Palmieri get a hat trick after a week of talking about how he would make the perfect trade deadline dismissal, probably must have felt like a very surreal experience.
It was. Yeah, I went with Emily, and she went with
All right. Yeah.
her Bruins gear on, and
Hmm.
the whole day I was a ball of nerves, and she wasn't, because she's a well-adjusted human being, who doesn't let her favorite hockey team
Yeah.
uh, run her life, run her
Hmm.
show, especially in March. Maybe it's one thing to let it happen in the middle of June when your team's like in a Stanley Cup final, but
Right.
right now, definitely not. And she kept out saying she had a bad feeling that the Islanders would win. And I said no. And then Palmieri scores kind of right out of the gate there.
Yeah.
And we actually talked about Palmieri right beforehand. And I was like, yeah, he's from Long Island and he's a great guy. It seems like everybody loves him. And yeah, he scores. And then he scores again.
Hmm.
And Emily's like, yeah, told you. And I said, told me. Like, this game has so much time left. And
Hmm.
how many times in the past couple months have you gone to bed and said, "Oh, what's the score in the game?" And I was like, "Oh, 3-1 Islanders." And then you wake up in the morning and you say, "Oh, did they win?" And I say, "No, they lost." And I explained to you how they lost, and you're like, "Come on!" And she just
Yeah.
starts laughing basically in my face and
Hmm.
asking me why I do this to myself. So I was trying to explain that you should know better than to think that this game was over. But I, as that game kept going on, like the more and more I kept saying, no, it's 4-0 at one point, 5-0. Like, it's really not over.
Hmm.
Like, the Bruins get one here, and I'm gonna be scared. And if even I was like, man, I feel like I'm even pandering because the Islanders just looked really sharp the whole
Yeah.
game. And the most encouraging thing about that game was that it seems obvious to say because Palmieri scored a hat trick, but that line of Lee, Pajot, and Palmieri, Wah sent them out for the opening faceoff, so it looked like, okay, he's going to match that up against uh, Pasternak, and I think Marchand was on his line last night, but whatever the opening faceoff, it looked like he was going with Pajot's line against the Bruins top line, and I was like, oh god, that's a little daunting because I've thought that um, I thought Palmieri on his own has looked really good for since Watt took over, really. But the other two parts of that line,
Hmm.
Pajot and Lee, have struggled, and the three of them were just a force last night. Like,
Yeah.
and if those three guys can find some sort of way to make that second line a net positive, it doesn't even have to be a big time net positive, but just a net positive. That allows Watt to keep the three really, really, really good players together, and all
Yeah.
of a sudden you're like, what, this team has a new look to it, a new feel to it. Um, so that line going was great, and just walking out of the building and thinking, you and me talked last Sunday, and in the depths of our despair, looking ahead to a schedule with Dallas,
Hmm.
a Dallas team that's a Stanley Cup favorite, a Bruins team that's a Stanley Cup favorite, and then a Red Wings team that had won 6 or 7 in a row, and it basically put the Islanders in their dust in the playoff race. We were looking ahead to this three game week, and we're like, honestly, like, they have to go out and win all of them.
Yeah.
That's it. The only way that this can continue is they go out and win all of them. They get some help on the scoreboard, and then maybe we can talk about just getting themselves back to the fringes of the playoff race. And they did it. And
Hmm.
so walking out of there being like, wow, mission accomplished. And the key thing about this Bruins win is that it comes on the heels of what will be maybe the softest stretch of schedule for the Islanders of the entire season in terms of like back to back to back opponents. So yeah, I mean, it was all of a sudden gotta go from mentally preparing myself for the Islanders to be playing out the string in March and April to,
Hmm.
oh god, the weather snapped into some good form this week, and especially today on Sunday, it's like sort of feels like you could smell the playoffs in the air in terms of the weather. So now you've now mentally you had to couch that mental preparation and kind of put it to the side, and now completely reverse course and mentally prepare yourself for oh boy, like we've got a real playoff push coming our way here.
Yeah.
With the caveat being it could blow up in our faces at any moment with this team, but um, it's a complete shift in focus and a complete change in the narrative in a course of 3 games and a week. And
Mm.
we're yeah, I had a friend who he used to do a funny bit that if we were like going outside at a college party or whatever to smoke a blunt or a joint or something, he would if we'd open up the door to come back in, and the first person he'd see would just go, "Hi, we're different now." And that's how I feel right now. It's like
Yeah.
we're walking back into the house, into the league, and we're like, "Oh, yeah, we're very different people than we were on Sunday." So, yeah, this is a the 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 twists and turns are um, exhausting, but right now
Yeah.
in a good way.
Yeah, it is funny how much 3 games could change everything. And right now, the Islanders are fourth in the Metro, 66 points, right behind Philly, who has 71. And that's a 5 point difference. And part of you is like, okay, that's better than 7 or 8, I suppose, but still a long way to go. And there is. And like you said, I mean, they have a kind of a soft part of the schedule coming up, although everything is on the road. And so winning these 3 games, while it seemed like a pipe dream when we spoke last week, has seriously changed everything, basically. The Bruins game, again, was just fantastic. Palmieri, that line worked great. Obviously, the Nelson line had a goal, too. Nelson actually, he came off the bench. I don't know if I should say the line had a great, because he came off the bench and he scored off a rebound. Linus Ullmark did not have a good game. No, not to take anything away from the Islanders, who played great. But that was not a good game for Linus Ullmark. He was leaving rebounds all over the place. Lee's goal was kind of hilarious. He kind of not only did Omar put the rebound almost right on his stick, but then he just decided to kind of vacate the net for the most part, and Lee just kind of knocked it in with the empty net almost. But it was fantastic. Mark McLaughlin broke the shutout later on, and it seemed like he want for the Bruins, and he wanted to celebrate a lot, but clearly I think he felt like, yeah, this is, I don't know about this, but I was afraid that the Bruins had just kind of like, when I came home and saw that the Islanders hadn't done anything in the third period or given up anything, I was like, oh, what did the Bruins just like take the rest of the game off? But it was surprisingly aggressive. In fact, the Boston had a pretty good power play late with Noah Dobson in the box. They had a bunch of chances, and but the Islanders hung on, and they didn't give him really anything. Although they were around the net, Pajot could have had a goal, but he was on 2-on-1 with Lee, and for some reason, kind of wanted to pass it back to him. I don't know why he just didn't shoot, but it was a fairly easy night for Sorokin. Again, he barely did anything with the first 2 periods, and then they needed him a little bit in the third a couple of times. But it was probably one of the better games they've played all season long, hat trick or no hat trick. So it was really great to see. Prior to that, though, I feel like this Detroit game may end up being, if the Islanders do make the playoffs, and again, that's still a pretty medium sized if or a big if at this point. I think this Detroit game might end up being the real turning point. 5-3 win in a place that has not been kind to the Islanders. The big story from this one is not a hat trick, but it is in fact an empty net goal. The Islanders' first of the season, scored by Mr. ENG himself, Pierre Engvall. And it was pretty wild to see them, finally get one. And if you haven't watched Patrick Waugh's post-game press conference about that one, where somebody asked him that, you should, because he just like laughs and he's like, yeah, somebody told me, Dad, and I couldn't believe it. And I was like, yeah, that's because you hadn't watched this team for the first 50 games of the season. But I thought this game was actually a pretty good performance. It wasn't perfect. The Red Wings did have their pushes. They were one of the hottest teams in the league coming into that game. And again, they would have their chances, and the Islanders would push back. But the way they tied the game, especially early in the third, Patrick Kane basically just opened, walked in 10 seconds into the third period, ties the game at 2. But the Islanders wouldn't be denied. They came back, they scored. Oli Mata tied the score again, and then Barzal basically scored the game winner, throwing the puck at the front of the net, kind of off Alex Lyon's pads. I thought Horvat had gotten a piece of it, but upon the replay, it went off Lyon and in. And again, he had been pretty hot for them, and then Engvall sealed it with the empty netter. This to me was actually a game in which I think might have been the first game where I have started to really feel like this is sort of the Patrick. I don't want to call it like Patrick Waugh putting a stamp on things, but it felt like a different team. It felt like a more confident team. It felt like, for lack of a better word, and you guys will understand what I mean, a normal 2019. Like this felt like a normal game. They push, you get, goal, they get a goal, you guys show resolve, you come back, you score, you keep them from scoring. They had a couple of chances there late, and then you seal it with an empty net goal. That's sort of how hockey kind of plays out in the 2020s, except unless you're the Islanders, in which all hell breaks loose, and, no matter how little is left on the clock, and you end up being disappointed. This seemed like a very normal game. It was almost like a playoff game, really. And I came away very impressed. And I came away really more so. We'll talk about the Dallas game in a second, but like this one really was the one that really kind of got me thinking, maybe there is something here. And maybe, the time under Watt has worked. What do you think of this one? Again, it wasn't perfect, but I thought, to me, this is before the Bruins game. This might have been one of their better games of the season. I mean, that, in my opinion.
This game exhausted me. Like that, because the Islanders get that 2-goal lead. First of all, Brock Nelson was unplayably good. He was
Yes,
he
really
was like
good.
the best player on the planet on that night. I would say. Um, there's like maybe 3 people in the NHL that scored that first goal that he did, where he just
Yeah,
was like a shark
right.
in some water, and he
I love
bit
those.
the surfer's foot
Yeah, he's just
without
like
them.
cruising through the slot, and boom,
Yeah,
he's got to go.
and then he
Yeah.
just takes it from, I think it was Ben Sherrod, I don't know who it
Mm,
was, but, takes it off his stick and quickly just roofs it, and yeah, there's, like, 1 player in the NHL that scores that goal,
mm,
and it was fun because we did a Patreon episode with Desmond, from the Through the Island podcast a couple nights prior, and talked a lot about, what's the path forward for this team, and what can you do, and we were trying to be as realistic about it as possible, and I think, just the most contentious debate among Islander fans now is about Nelson, and he put on full display like why I think the people who don't want to trade this guy are you when people are like, well, what, you got to get assets for this is bad asset management. Like he is a really good player. Like why would we want to just trade a guy because it that's what you're supposed to do in this situation. Like you're supposed to keep your good players, I would think. And it's as I said on that episode, it's become an annoying conversation just because it's like becoming tribalistic and people are making other people feel like they're bad people for wanting to or not to trade Brock Nelson, and it's not fun at all to listen to. And I was happy that his performance that night was timed with all that because it kind
mm.
of shut everybody up. And was like, oh, maybe we should just enjoy. We spend so much time analyzing um, sports and the world in general that we can't, and Brock Nelson maybe more specifically, that why can't we just witness Brock Nelson? So that was great. Yeah, they get out to that 2-goal lead, and you knew that, as you said, like this was a classic game where Barry Trotz would say we knew they were going to push back in the second, and we did a good job managing it, except the Islanders didn't. And next thing you know, it's 2-1. They go into the intermission, and I don't think it was a question of if, but when the Red Wings were going to score again.
Mm.
And I was like, look, the Red Wings are going to tie this game 2-2. You have to be ready for that. You know it's coming. It's just how this team goes, and the response to that goal is what's going to tell you where this game is going and where the season maybe is going. I did not expect it to be 13 seconds in to the third period there.
Seriously.
Maybe, you said this was a good game overall. I thought the Islanders were good.
Mm.
They managed the pushbacks and the momentum really well. That was maybe their worst 20-second span
Yeah.
of the season, because you're like, all right, you're coming out of the locker room. You
Mm.
probably had a conversation of, we have to, just know that they're going to come out looking for that goal. They're going to be aggressive, and that Pajot line I was talking about just fell asleep at the wheel. And
Yeah. Shout
it's
out to Thomas Hickey, who I think it was Thomas Hickey, who was like, "This is a disastrous start to the opening this third period."
yep,
And I'm like, yeah,
yeah,
you got it. Yeah, it's true.
yeah. And then they responded really well with the goal to make it 3-2. Of course, Oli Mata has his first 2-goal game and
I know.
maybe his career against us. And that shift that he scored the second one, Hickey had another great line where he's like, yeah, you could be out of sorts for like 10 or 15
Yeah.
seconds, but you can't do it for like a minute and a half like that
Yeah.
was. And I think what was frustrating about that shift was you looked at, there was a Christian Fischer, I think, was like standing in front of the net for like the entire
Yeah.
shift unmarked. and Hickey's like, do the Islanders know that he's there? Like, who's gonna mark that guy? And everyone's like looking around, and all of a sudden Matt Martin's like, oh shit, that's my guy.
Yeah.
And that kind of just set off the wheels in motion for the Red Wings to score. And then they get the game winner, and like that was a game where I was like, I said, I was talking to a couple of my friends, like, I want to go to. I was gonna watch the second episode of that show, Shogun on Hulu
Yeah, I gotta watch
FX.
that.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's great so far,
Yeah.
and I was like, I just want to be able to watch that show and think about the show
Mm.
and be happy rather than watch that show and just be thinking, God fucking damn it, the Islanders are pissing me off. And I wish I was in 16th century Japan and didn't have any idea what the Islanders were or
Right.
hockey um
Or ice. I don't think
or
they had
ice.
ice
Yeah,
there.
yeah, just worried about, doing my duty and
Right.
living my life according to that code, and um be a lot easier than whatever the hell we're dealing with this
Mm.
team. But yeah, that that was as cathartic a win as we've had this season, I think, because of the swings involved, and uh the Red Wings coming back to tie it. The Islanders blew 3 leads in that game, right? 2
Yeah, I
nothing.
think so.
Well, yeah, I guess 2 nothing, and then 3-2 to get the win. And that Nelson, Barzal, Horvat line, that was the game to me. Like, I know they had a decent game against Dallas, but
Mm.
when the way they were going against the Red Wings, I was like, holy shit. Because the only issue that really arose from that game with the Islanders was that line was going, the Cizikas with between the 2 Swedes. I mean,
Mm.
Cizikas could, if you looked at him, you're like, this guy could be Swedish with his blonde hair and blue eyes. So, um,
The
but
Swedish
between,
connection,
yeah, Swedish connection
as
and
Waz called them. Yeah.
Cizikas, or
Yeah.
as you like to point out, as Wa likes to say, Cizikas,
Yeah.
um, Cizikas and the Swedish connection. That line was awesome, and has been awesome, I think, since they've been put together. And Kyle McLean, man,
Mm.
like, he had a really good game in that one as well. So, like, everything was and the defense pairs, since they jumbled them up, have, I think, looked really good. Mike Riley and Sebastian Aho out of nowhere
Yes.
has become a really reliable pairing. So all of a sudden, everything was kind of piecing together. There was one sore spot, and it was that Lee Pajot Palmieri line. I thought Lee was pretty terrible in this game himself, and but you thought to yourself, there's something bubbling here, and if they don't hold on, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it looks good, if things are starting to maybe piece themselves together under Wah, if they don't come out of here with 2 points and blow another lead, and they didn't, and that, like you said, that was a game where I thought, and I think we'll talk more about this in the second half, but I thought people were going to start kind of just raising their eyebrows slightly about the Islanders,
Mm.
being like, okay, they've now won 2 in a row. They ended this winning streak for Detroit. They beat Dallas on the road on Monday night. Like, let's maybe just take a peek.
Mm.
But this is becoming one of those, like Nelson. Like, this is becoming one of those situations where the Islanders are just kind of stalking the pace. They're in the water under the surfer, and nobody's really paying attention to them
No.
outside of us. So we're
Yeah.
back into our natural place in the world, I guess, where we're just kind of like on the fringe of society,
Right.
um, and operating. Emily had some funny, remarks just about, like, Islander fans generally. And I was
Mm.
like, that's kind of a reflection on the team. Like, we're kind of people who do our best work in like the gray area, and we're operators and doing our, in the fringes of society is where we feel most natural, and I feel like that's what the Islanders are, because I
Yeah.
mean, the NHL, I don't even know if the Islanders are included in the NHL. They just are part of the league, right? Like, it's just
We've done this before where it feels like they're not part of the NHL.
right.
Like they're
Yeah,
just
they're not.
operating on their own kind of plane of existence. But yeah,
Yep.
no, I agree. Yeah.
And but here they are, and
Yeah.
people might just be like, "Up they're, here the
Mm.
Islanders. This is where they've been all season, right? Like, we all said, this is a team that's probably going to be right around the playoff cut line. Like, oh
Yeah.
my god,
Right.
you have no idea what we've been through."
So the Blues, who we're going to talk about in the second half because they play the Islanders on Tuesday, they play the Flyers on Monday. So if Philly loses that game and the Islanders beat the Blues on Tuesday, the Islanders would be just 3 points behind Philly with 2 games in hand, because they still have 2 games in hand right now. So that's, I think, maybe where we can see people being like, wow, things have gotten really close here all of a sudden. But as of right now, I think they can still safely ignore the Islanders. But yeah, I thought that, yeah, just cooling off Detroit would have been kind of something, but nobody mentioned it. I thought getting the empty net goal would be something, but I guess nobody else was paying attention but us, because we've been talking about this all season long. Like, we've been talking about this in December. Like, how
I
is
thought
this
the same
possible?
thing about Palmieri. Palmieri scored a hat trick in the first period, and
Right.
nobody.
But Ryan Reeves and Matt Rempe fought,
Right.
so forget about
Yes.
everybody else. Right?
Yeah, because as you found out, I thought it's pretty funny. The Matt Rempe plot line was as he was, the bell of the ball crushing Islander players, the bell of the ball running over Nathan Bastian, the bell of the ball fighting the guy in the Blue Jackets. But boy, what's the Batman line? You either live long enough to die a hero, or
Yep.
well, it's either you live long enough, or you die a guy who didn't hurt a maple leaf. But once he laid his hands on a maple leaf, the conversation about Matt Rempe changed from
now
this
it's real.
guy's so cool to we got to find a way to get this guy out of the league.
Yeah. It's true. You've hit us where we live, and where we live meaning we being the Canadian hockey media, and where we live being Toronto. So yeah, well, he stepped in it now. So now he's going to be, and now the next step in this evolution is for him to get traded to the Oilers, in which case I'll have to have like think piece after think piece about whether or not this is a good idea or not. But in any event, it was kind of a cool moment, or these 2 games have been cool for the Islanders, but I do think that they're not going to really pay attention until they get a little bit closer. One last thing on Detroit. Sorokin made an enormous stop on Kane, on a Patrick Kane, on a 2-on-1 in the third. He looked a little shaky, I thought, at points in that game, but that goal, that save might have saved the game. I don't know if Butch would have said that, or they gave it the Ford or Acura, Honda, whatever it is, save of the game, but it should have been, because that was a fantastic save and changed things. Had they gone to overtime with those guys, they would have lost. Let's be honest. But again, it was a normal game, which was great to see.
You know what? I thought him and Lyon were both kind of shaken.
Yeah, for sure.
The kick plate behind the net, because
that was doing all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, it was like Joe Louis Arena all over again, with like the puck was just bouncing everywhere on dump ins and stuff, and Hickey kept bringing it up too, and Brendan and Butch, and they're like, what the hell's going on? So I think that kind of just like screwed with their minds a bit, but yeah, I think he just generally speaking, Sorokin has been at like a really good baseline level over the past couple weeks under Wah. So yeah, I'm feeling good about that being a huge part of the Islanders' playoff push now, is that that goaltending seems to be a really, really big strength again.
Yeah, that's true. And don't worry about Semyon Varlamov. We will definitely see him in California next week, if not this week, against the Blues or the Sharks. We'll see. Okay, one last game goes back all the way to Monday. Another fun one against the Dallas Stars. Islanders won 3-2 in overtime. 2 big stories come out of this. One, Logan Stankoven gets called up from the Texas Stars. The AHL is immediately one of Dallas's better players. And this is, again, a team that has Stanley Cup aspirations. He scores his first goal. We all should have seen that coming. He looks like a real player, and that it'll be cool to watch him integrate into that lineup. But the biggest thing from this game was Stankoven getting showed up by a player, 6 or 7 years his senior, Mat Barzal, in one of the most insane overtime shifts we have ever seen. And I've watched it 4 or 5 times since then. I'm sure you have. I'm sure a lot of people have. To me, this was one of those shifts where I think immediately to all of the times that Barzal himself has said that he wants to be seen in the same light as people like Sidney Crosby, guys who just take over games. This was a game or a shift or an overtime, whatever you want to call it, that Barzal literally took over. He almost gave the puck away, refused to let the Dallas defender take it, took the puck back, lost it again, took it back again, left the zone, came back, circled around, finds Bo Horvat in the slot, who just wires it home. To me, that shift is everything that I ever want out of Mat Barzal. He looked absolutely gassed at the end of it, so I don't know how much he can even do that again if he wanted to. But this, to me, is the ideal Barzal. Like, I think this is what Barzal wants for himself. This is what I know I want to see from Barzal, whether he's center, whether he's a winger, it doesn't matter. This is the guy who can take over a game and just decide, no, I'm not letting you guys get the puck back. And I, this might be, a little wishful thinking on my part, but I wonder if that shift may have had an effect on the next game, which was the Red Wings game, which we just talked about, where the Islanders were like, we need to do that little extra bit, because there was a lot more of that in the Detroit game than we had seen previously. That little extra bit, that little like getting in the lane or getting that, not letting them easily take the puck back, and getting into the battles, having more skin in the game, as Barry Trotz used to say. I wonder if that shift had that kind of effect on the Islanders. I don't know, but how many times have you watched that shift? What was your feeling watching it? I couldn't go to sleep. I'll be honest with you. I was glad I was working from home the next day, because I was not going to go to sleep after watching that shift. It was awesome. It was awesome. And, we've seen Barzal have a lot of awesome moments, but man, he just refused to let Dallas take the puck. And even when he had to leave the zone, he still was holding on. Actually, Horvat almost got rid of it, almost lost it too, but he got it back and ended up kind of setting up his own goal by giving it back to Barzal. So just a fantastic shift. And what again was a pretty good game. Dallas, they pushed back, but the Islanders would push back again. And I thought it was a pretty tight game from two good teams. One that seemed to be going in opposite directions just 24 hours before. But what did you think of the shift? Again, how many times have you watched it, and what were your thoughts going on there?
Yeah, I watched a bunch that night because I was like, this. I was waiting for the clip to come out because most of the immediate clips on Twitter were just his
Yeah,
the last like 6 or 7 seconds
Yeah.
of the shift where he kind of tried to shake and bake Essa
Yeah.
Lindell and then pass it to Horvat.
you got to
But I
watch
was
the
waiting.
full thing to get
Yeah,
the full effect. Yeah,
and I was once again kind of waiting, and I know this is pathetic, but like I was waiting to see if because I feel like a lot of times when shifts like that go on in overtime, you get the people just commenting on it, being like, "This is crazy," but it didn't. Some people took notice of it, but most people didn't. Um, I thought that was the best overtime shift since that guy we drafted before Victor Hedman against Sean Couturier and against the Flyers. When he stole the puck and like kind of put it through his legs and to get a goal. I can't remember what year that was, but um, the that game to me, like Barzal, I thought it was really good, but he just lacked like the clinical finishing execution on a lot of the stuff that he was trying to set up, and um, the that shift capping it off was like, holy hell, like he deserved that. 100% deserved it. Deserved all the praise he got after. And like you said, the first thing I thought was, I really hope that everybody on that bench just said, okay, if this guy is gonna just gas himself to
right.
make that happen, to win us a game on his own against one of the best teams in the league, we need to pick our shit up. And uh, to their credit, I think that they have and responded to it. And you were talking about that Red Wings game being perhaps the moment where you look back on and think the Islanders kind of platform themselves to a push. I thought that shift just, and it seems obvious to say now, could be what we look back on and say, like, this is where the tide turned. Matt Barzal doing this because it seemed like it seems like for the past few weeks since Watt took over, Barzal's taken you called it the ideal Barzal. I think that's a good way to put it. He's become that superstar player who also is doing all the little things on the ice. And I don't want to say it like this, but I'm going to say it like the Sidney Crosby-ification of him, where he's 200 feet. He's harassing guys on the puck. He's making smart decisions with the puck. And I think part of it might just be a response to, I'm playing with Bo Horvat and Brock Nelson. Like, I'm playing on with
Yeah.
this is the best line I've ever played on, and I need to make it count, because if it doesn't work, then it's not going to happen maybe ever again. It's taken this long for me to get put on a line this good, so I don't want to blow it. And he's been really, really good all season, but I think he's at a level now where those three guys are probably like, it's on us. Like, we're playing on the top line. We need to be the guys to get this team over into the tournament. And right now the early returns are good, and I think that Patrick Waugh deserves boatload of credit for the way that things are going right now, because not
Mm.
only did he do this with did he mix up the lines and I think take a couple of chances with the putting together Pajot with Lee and Palmieri as a second line where you're like, oof, two of those guys are really struggling right now. You want that to be the line that backs up the Barzal line. And then after them, it's like you got Holmstrom, Zizekas, and Engvall. They've never played together. How is this going to work? And then the decision to stick Kyle McLean between Martin and Clutterbuck as well. Like and then of course messing with the defensive pairings, and it's just worked really well. So he's obviously seen something that he thinks is going to work, and or is it just him being like, look, we're seven, whatever they were, 9, 7 points out of it
Mm.
going into that Dallas game. We're gonna just go down swinging, as he said in that put your balls on the table kind of quote. Like we're just gonna do that, and I'd much rather watch that. Like I'd rather watch the coach and the team go down swinging in these moments than Lane Lambert be like, yeah, we're just gonna hope that we can find our way through it and sticking to the formula that he thinks is right and be too stubborn to change it. So that has been encouraging. The way that basically everyone's going, everybody with Lee and Pajot having such a good night against the Bruins, like you think that almost everybody on the team is heading in the right direction. Maybe you can gripe with Martin right now, but
Mm.
even him, like him and Clutterbuck, I thought were pretty good against the Bruins.
Mm.
Martin got hurt, but everybody seems to be going in the right direction, and I think it all started with this Dallas game where people are or the players are being like, you know what, enough of it. Like we've been asking for this sense of urgency since the Islanders had a 4-1 lead against the San Jose Sharks at home. Like we've been like, guys, like the season ends at some point. Please start
Right.
getting your act together, or else something's going to happen. And it does seem like they finally have clicked into that realization here, and maybe part of it is that the trade deadline's on the other end uh, of this week, so they're maybe getting jolted by the fact that if they don't get a few wins, some of their friends, some of the guys that their kids call Uncle John Gabriel or Uncle Kyle or Uncle
Mm.
Brock are going to be or could be traded. So I don't know what it is, but it's been quite a fun week to be an Islander
Yeah.
fan for the first time in 4 months.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Yeah, no, absolutely. And it has been a fun week. And one guy you mentioned, I want to mention before we hit our break, you mentioned him a minute ago. Kyle McLean also scored again in that Dallas game. And he's looked really, really good in that fourth line role. I am going to talk a lot about Martin when we talk about the trade deadline, but he's looked great. He
Yeah,
has absolutely fit in perfectly there and has allowed Zizekas to move up a little bit, obviously allowed the first line to play. And,
yeah.
it's, again, this is kind of what you want to see, a guy called up from the minors, hits the lineup, and it's fine. Like he
And he sticks
just
in the
fits right
and he
in. It's just
sticks.
fine. Yeah.
Like he's not he's not sent right back down when
Right.
so and so is back. He's playing well. He's got a spot now. I would think, and um yeah, and we talked about that goal that you just mentioned by McLean, like that play by
Mm.
Engvall.
Mm.
He's looked like a completely different player the past week. Like he's looked like
Yeah,
the
really.
Pierre Engvall we saw when the Islanders traded for him. And that line with Zizekas and Holmstrom, we talked about this on the Patreon we did, which I do encourage you to maybe listen to it
Yeah.
because I think it was a good way to remind yourself to, at the very least, just not look at the For You page on Twitter at this time of year. But if that's the only thing you get out of it, it's going to help you. But the one of the points we brought up with Martin and Zizekas and Clutterbuck was that we really don't know what Casey Zizekas' ceiling is as a
Yeah.
hockey player. We have a pretty general idea that he's not gonna be up playing with the Mat Barzals of the world, but we don't know his true ceiling, like how good of a third line or center he'd be, because he's played his entire career almost exclusively with Matt Martin and Cal Clutterbuck. So
Mm.
giving him two guys who are gifted with the puck on their stick, who are fast, who can finish chances regularly. Like this is it's a new look at a player that we've had with the Islanders for what was he at? He's got to be like
Oh
close
God.
to 800
10
games.
years. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is it's funny to be like, oh, we're finally getting to see what Casey Zizekas is
Yeah.
made of.
It's true. It's true. Well, I mean, and that's not taking anything away from Martin and Clutterbuck, who obviously were very good with
Right.
Cizikas for a long time, but those two guys are obviously slowing down. And yeah, it's nice to see Casey play with some other guys, and he's still got the wheels. That's for sure. That's never been a problem with Cizikas. So it's been a fun week. We're gonna take a break, talk about games coming up. Hopefully, the fun continues, and then we're gonna get into our trade deadline discussion. Who we could maybe see the Islanders going for, or maybe they don't do anything. We'll see. Because let me tell you, would have been a very, very different discussion had we had it last week than if we had it this week. So give us a couple minutes and meet us on the other side. Thanks.
And now a word from our sponsors. First is VintageIceHockey.com, where you can get t-shirts, hoodies, jerseys, mugs, and more featuring over 100 classic hockey logos. Vintage Ice Hockey also carries our Al Arbour and the Island merch, and our portion of the sales always go directly to the Center for Dementia Research. Use the code ANXIETY20 to save 20% off an order of 2 items. That is VintageIceHockey.com. Try wines from the Pinot Project. They offer a Rosé, a Pinot Grigio, and a Pinot Noir that was named a 2022 Top 100 Best Buy by Wine Enthusiast magazine. All are delicious, priced at less than $15 a bottle, and available at local wine shops and at UBS Arena. Learn more at thepinotproject.com. Please drink responsibly. The fine folks at FOCO have 2 new Islanders bobbleheads commemorating the Stadium Series game at MetLife Stadium. Order your Ilya Sorokin or Sparky bobblehead today at FOCO.com or click the link in the podcast description. These are limited to 124 pieces, so act now. That's FOCO, FOCO.com.
Before we get into next week's games, just a couple of real quick notes about our upcoming schedule of podcasts. So the Islanders are going to head out to California starting Thursday with a game against the Sharks. They play in Anaheim on Sunday and then in LA on Monday. We want to wait till after those games are over to record our next episode of Anxiety. So we're going to record on Tuesday the 12th, and then that episode will go live, the usual time just after midnight on Wednesday. So basically the next Islanders Anxiety is going to come out on Wednesday. However, that is not the only episode of podcasting we are going to have next week. On Monday, before the game in LA starts, we are going to record our monthly mailbag episode exclusively for Country Club tier subscribers over at the Patreon. I'm going to put out the call for questions on Friday the 8th, which is the trade deadline. So I'm assuming afterwards, a lot of people are going to have a lot of things to say. So it should be a very lively mailbag episode. Like I said, we're going to record that before the game against the Kings. If we get a lot of trade deadline questions, maybe I'll put out like a shorter, free version on the regular feed, and then the full version will be on the Patreon, depending on like what the Islanders do at the deadline, what the questions are, that sort of thing. But yeah, basically next Anxiety on Wednesday the 13th, and a mailbag episode is gonna come out on Tuesday the 12th after the Kings game, and the questions are going to be asked. We're going to ask for questions starting on Friday. So that's just a little bit. The week after, I also can't record on Sunday the 17th. The Islanders are playing the Rangers that day, so that's going to be recorded on Monday. Episode will go live Tuesday. I'll mention it again next week. So we got a lot going on, but we'll be here, so don't worry about it. Okay, so let's talk about these games real quick coming up, and then we'll get to the trade deadline. So the Islanders really just have 2 games this week. I guess 3 if you count Sundays. They have the Blues on Tuesday at 7:30. Again, St. Louis is playing Philly in Philly the night before. Islanders getting a benefit of a back-to-back there. And then it's off to California. San Jose on Thursday, Anaheim on Sunday, LA on Monday. The San Jose and LA games are at 10:30. The Anaheim game is at 8, which is great, but it's I guess a 5 o'clock local start. I want to lump the the California games together, but let's talk about St. Louis real quick. The Islanders have won 3 in a row. They could make winning these games, and they have Buffalo on the other side of that whole trip. They could potentially be looking at 8 games in a row as wins. I mean, this is a chance to really, 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 really pick up some points. Step 1 in that plan would be not falling on your face against the Blues like you did last week in one of the most disappointing games of the season, of a season packed with disappointing games. I don't think the Islanders are going to forget what happened to the Blues. The worst thing about that Blues game, by the way, is something you pointed out to me in our text, which is that The Islanders get shut out in St. Louis by Jordan Binnington. And then 2 days later, the Blues are in Detroit, and Binnington gets lit up for 3 goals in the first period. I think he might have gotten pulled in that game. And it's like, of course he did. That was kind of just how it went. The Islanders need to beat the Blues on Tuesday. They need to. They can't, regardless of what happens in Philly, they need to win this game. The Blues right now are out of the playoffs. They have one less point than the Islanders do. They have a minus 12 in the goal differential department, which is in the same ballpark as the Islanders goal differential. There's absolutely no reason that they can't beat this team, and it's going to make that 4-0 loss seem much worse again. But they need to do, and the Blues haven't changed all that much since that game. So go out and win this game. This is an ESPN game, unfortunately. I know you're going to be there, so hopefully they can put up a good show for you. But this to me is a non-negotiable situation.
Yeah.
Like they have to walk out of there with 2 points.
It's a must-win game because it opens the door to a serious run. Like
Yes.
I thought that's why this Bruins game was so key. Was that, look, you can, the Islanders could have lost that game last night, and we would be sitting here talking about more about a missed opportunity.
Yes.
But they've kept themselves alive for another week. Now they have to go and win all these games against these beatable teams. But beating the Bruins, now all of a sudden the door's open to the Islanders winning 4 in a row in St. Louis. And if they do that, they play San Jose and Anaheim up next. And all of a sudden it's one of those 6-game streaks where we're like, the request of this team for the past 2 months was they just need to go on a run. They just need to go on a run, and then they could get themselves into the playoffs. And then all of a sudden you realize, this is the run. This is the run. This is the moment too. This is
right.
This is the part of the season where it's we're going to find out if the Islanders are going to earnestly make a playoff push or not in these couple games, because it's 3 winnable games in a row. I think that game against the Kings, of course, is tough. I don't want to look too far ahead, but then coming back like across the country to play the Sabres. I think the Islanders did this last year. And that game, instead of this playing in Buffalo, it was like in Columbus, and they ended up losing in overtime in a game that was a harbinger of things to come this season, where they blew leads to a bad team. But this all the kind of the key to this entire operation is kind of this game against the Blues. Because if they do take care of business, they're going to be a favorite. The Blues are on the back-to-back. Their season could kind of be over by the time that this game happens. I know that they just won they're a pretty big game against the Wild over the weekend, but if they lose to the Devils, like, they could find themselves 7 or more points out of a playoff spot. And it's a team that is, a lot of people are circling over, Pavel Buchnevich and some other players. So this should be a team the Islanders should just walk over in this situation. They're getting a good schedule spot. They're going to be at home. They put a serious emphasis. Patrick Waugh kept talking about how I thought he had a great line right after the Red Wings game, which was that, now we got to go home and win because our fans have been patient with us, and like they deserve the, and I was like, thank you for saying that. That made me feel so much better about myself and how frazzled I've been with this team, not just this season, but just the past couple weeks, more specifically, because I'm like, I can see what you're trying to do, and you guys are almost there, but you're not doing it, and you need to win. And the fan base has been patient with it to some extent. So him just realizing that really just shows you that this guy's got a really good grasp on things. And so, and I feel like Mat Barzal, by the way, too, is essentially the same way. Like he's an NHL nerd who pays attention to the whole league. We'll talk about some players in the end of the show where we talk about the trade deadline that he's been like reaching out to because they're his friends, and he wants to make sure that they're doing all right with their name in the trade rumors. But like Barzal and Patrick Waugh to me they're Islander fans. They understand what we're going through because they're rooting for the Islanders. One of them plays for them and the other one coaches them, but they're also rooting for the Islanders. Barzal was talking about right after the Red Wings game. He's like, I haven't seen the scores from around the league yet, but hopefully we got some help. And I was like, man, this guy's scoreboard watching there with me every night. He's on his couch watching the Penguins and he's watching the Flyers, and it made me feel great. But I do trust that this team will recognize that this Blues game, it's a It's an Islanders versus Blues game on March 5th, and neither team is in a playoff spot right now. It seems like just an absolute dud of a game, and it's on ESPN, which makes it a little bit funnier, but it's not. This is a crucial game because it could give the Islanders 2 more points to go into a 2-game stint where they can, if they don't get 4 out of 4, it's a massive step back. So yeah, this Blues game is I feel like we hype up every game as a massive one, but this one truly feels like a different version of the same game. Our good friend Bud Lightlyman was talking about how if you're looking at the Islanders season right now, it's essentially every game is a 1-game playoff, and if you win it, you buy yourself another 1-game playoff.
Yep.
Well, this Blues game feels like more than that. It feels like maybe like a cup final, and if the Islanders win, they get to like stay in the race, and it's huge, and it's a game they got to win. I'm gonna be a nervous wreck all Tuesday for a game against the St. Louis Blues, and yeah, that's just where and it's not my fault; it's their fault for putting us in this situation.
Well, I was going to say there's a reason we keep hyping up these games, and that's because they spent the first half of the season not winning games. Like, that's the thing, you know. But they didn't fall far enough out to just give up, just to be like, well, listen, this season is a write-off. What are you going to do? Like, you got to move on. They were always hanging around thanks to the incompetence of a lot of the other teams in their division. And now, like you said, they're in a position to go on a run, and that needs to start on Tuesday against the Blues. It's also funny, that Bud Lightlyman tweet is great. I'll see if I can find it and put it in there. But it reminds me of the old days in the arcade when, you know, the winner kept on playing. So if you were going to play Mortal Kombat or Street Fighter 2, as long as you kept winning, you could stay there. And once you lost, boom, you were done. And you had to go back to the back of the line or go someplace else in the mall or something like that. So this is what the Islanders have to live with right now. And again, the Tuesday's game against the Blues is a non-negotiable. They need to win that game. I don't care how it's done, just get 2 points out of it, because then we're going out to California. Now, sometimes this road trip has not been great, and sometimes it has been a place where the Islanders have turned things around. Right now, they're going to be playing right off the bat. They're going to be playing 2 of the worst teams in the league in San Jose and Anaheim. They need to avenge that loss to the Sharks from earlier in the season. That would be a perfect place to do it, a perfect time to do it. By avenging, I mean beat their asses 7 or 8-0 and forget about the stupid blown 4-1 lead you had back in December or whatever it was. The Ducks, too, have been, you know, completely done since the season started. Who even knows who'll even be on that team after the trade deadline? So that is a winnable game. And then the Kings we've heard this story for the last little while. They started out when the Islanders first played them in UBS Arena. They were one of the best teams in the league. They had like a historic road winning streak. They came in all guns firing, and since then they have not been very good. They've lost a ton of games. They fired their coach. This is a winnable game as well. So this right now, I mean, I'm with you. I do not want to put my cart in front of the horse. I don't want to count my chickens before they've hatched. I don't want to do whatever your cliche of choice is right now. But I'm looking at a run here with Buffalo and Ottawa, and frankly, the Rangers, all right in the week after. I'm looking at a grouping here where the Islanders can pick up somewhere in the neighborhood of, they've already gotten 6 points. We were talking about getting another 6 wins in a row. Geez, you're talking about a 20-point swing or something like that, where even if the other teams are winning, you're still going to make up ground because you're just not losing. And they're going to be like, oh shit, these guys are right in the rearview mirror. How do you see this California road trip happening? Again, I'm not saying these games are going to be easy, because going out to California is never really easy for these guys. Just like coming to New York is never easy for them. But man, these teams right now are just ripe to be beaten by a team with a little bit of confidence, a game plan, and a goal of making the playoffs. You need to get these points.
Yeah, and like you said, it's not just this California swing. It's, if you look beyond it, you're like, crap. Like, it's still, the schedule's still there for them. Like, they're going to be playing. You could kind of put the Blues game aside, because I don't know how different St. Louis will look with the fact that they've got a back-to-back coming up, and they'll still fancy themselves in the playoff race. But the Sharks and the Ducks will be trading players all week.
Right.
The Kings
Sabres.
game, like we said, is going to be tough. It's the second night of a back-to-back, and that's the one you could say, like, if the Islanders could squeeze a point out of there or whatever. But then you peek past that, and as we said, Sabres, Senators, Rangers, like, if they can just take care of their business here, like, this is a kind of, we could be talking about, ahead of right after St. Patrick's Day, and I know you said our episode would be that Monday, so that Monday episode after that Rangers game in a couple of weeks, like, we could be talking about, we could be just completely different people compared to what we were after that, the watching them throw up all over themselves against the Blues and the Lightning a week ago. And this is kind of what we've been saying all season about this team is it's right there. Like, it's right there. Like, we could, if you didn't shoot yourself in the foot 3 times a week, like, this entire podcast and the entire fan base would be giddy. Like, it's not, that's all it is. It's like, you guys just need to make 3 less mistakes a game, and like, this is a completely different story. Like, the team has the narrative is completely different, and it's now on this kind of teetering seesaw here, where it's, the season's either, there's really a zero-sum game where, like, the season either ends up as being an absolute colossal waste of time, where we look back at ourselves sitting here right now and say, why did we even get our hopes up? Like, that was so stupid of us. This team has proven to us so many times that it can't help itself in a situation when it's given a gun and a foot. Or it goes the other way, and we're like, man, it was so worth it to go through all those ups and downs and swings and peaks and valleys, because it ended up with a great playoff push. They get into the playoffs as a surprise, and who knows where they go from there. So that's what's so scary and daunting here, is it's either one or the other right now. And the questions that will come after the season's over about the players and different legacies and all that really kind of hang in the balance too. Seriously. So there's a lot at stake here, and I don't want to say that it all comes down to beating the St. Louis Blues on March 5th, but it really feels like it could.
Or the Anaheim Ducks in March, whatever. Like, it's no, but you're right. Like, this is where the story is going to lay, and you're going to be able to be like, well, they sucked for 50 games or 40 whatever games. They brought in Patrick Waugh, and then they sucked a little bit less, and then they went on a crazy run and made the playoffs. Like, that's a story that I think we would all get behind. If they sucked for 40 something games, brought in Patrick Waugh, sucked a little less, and then still didn't make the playoffs because they, were too far behind.
Score an empty net goal for the first 58 games.
Right. Or, their hot streak came just a little bit too early and nobody else lost enough. Then it would feel like, I don't know about a waste of time, but it would definitely feel like I ran myself ragged for what? Like, for nothing. So, but you're right. I mean, that obviously the LA game is on a back-to-back, but I mean, all right, so fine. I will downgrade my opinion to, if you get 1 point out of that, it's okay. But that assumes that you already won in San Jose and Anaheim. If you haven't,
you need to get 5 out of 6 of those games any way possible. And, you need what would that be? Make 7 of 8 from the 4 games this week if you throw the Blues game in there, and it would be nice. Maybe they could score enough. Maybe they could go on a 2-week empty net goal scoring streak. That would be nice to score a couple empty net goals here.
Well,
my favorite part about that, by the way, was that Palmieri, right before Engvall scored, missed the net by 11 feet.
Yeah. And you're like, oh my God. But no, well, let's see what happens. Yeah, let's try and keep the streak alive for another week. But we talked about meaningful games, and these are meaningful games now. So we'll see what happens. And then again, you get 2 days off, and then you're in Buffalo. So there's a room for there too. But we'll talk about that next week. So so big ones. Put the coffee on, get some candy or whatever, your Red Bull, whatever you got, and stay up and watch those games. Okay, we have been dancing around it. We've been talking about it. The trade deadline is on Friday, March 8th. There's no telling who's going to be on what team as we approach that point or after that point. That goes for the Islanders, obviously. As Mike mentioned, we did do a special Patreon exclusive episode with our friend Desmond Through the Island podcast called Let's Unfuck the Islanders. And the idea was more about sort of the future, clearing out cap space, getting things set up for more success in future seasons rather than the trade deadline. So I don't think we're going to contradict anything by talking about it here. But we're going to probably talk about some of the similar guys. But if you haven't heard it, go back and listen. It was really a great conversation and a lot of fun. People really seem to like it. But in terms of this trade deadline, these 3 wins have obviously changed the Islanders' fortune. A week ago, most people would have been like, "Well, trade all these guys. Who cares?" Right? But now, creeping closer to a playoff berth, or at least putting a little bit of a scare in the Flyers probably right now, changes things quite significantly. They don't have a ton of tradable assets. Yes, they do have a first-round pick, but I don't know if this is one of those times when Lamoriello wants to use it on something big. In fact, after these 3 wins, I kind of wonder if a change might be a small one. I don't think it's going to be big. I have some depth players that I think might end up happening. There is, of course, the legendary, the classic depth of defenseman. But again, I don't know if that's going to happen because the Islanders have a lot of those. I'm going to throw it to you right off the bat. Like, how do you see this trade deadline going for the Islanders? Are we looking at a big move here that, kind of shakes things up and puts a notable player on the Islanders, possibly in the top 6, or you think it's going to be more subtle moves, kind of depth moves like that? Like I kind of see it.
Yeah, I think it's the overwhelming likelihood is that the Islanders make do nothing, or they make a quiet move or two.
I was going to say a third option would be do nothing.
Yeah,
yeah, that makes sense.
But I would start to think that it's probably going to be that they do something, because I think that there's at least one player in particular, Oliver Wahlstrom, who I think the Islanders are going to try desperately to find a home for. That's not Long Island, because they're going to need the roster space with Fashion coming back and Kyle McLean looking really, really good in that fourth line center role. But that'd be my guess, is it'll be much more subtle. And when I say subtle, I mean it in terms of like how the rest of the league perceives it, because I think that there's a couple of players, one in particular, that if the Islanders traded for him, while the rest of the hockey world would be like, yeah, that makes sense, like a decent ad for the Islanders here, it would be a monumental day and the player I'm talking about is Jordan Eberle. I guess to a lesser extent Anthony Beauvillier, but I can absolutely see the Islanders going after Eberle here with the way that the roster is sitting at the moment. They could use, I think, a player with top 6 upside in case Wah needs, because I don't think you can go into a playoff series if the goal here is to make the playoffs. I don't think you can go into the playoff series with Nelson, Barzal, and Horvat on one line, and then Pajot as your second line center. So I think you're gonna have to bump Nelson back down and move things around it. So like it could be Eberle, Nelson, and Palmieri, and who knows where that puts Lee, but maybe back on the top line. But this is he makes a lot of sense, and maybe I'm being biased because I love the guy, but that would just be, man. Can you imagine getting Eberle back? And he's one of the guys, as I was talking about. Barzal did an interview with, I can't remember who it was. I think it was Ethan Sears, where he was saying that he was texting Beauvillier and Beauvillier and Eberle, just like checking in and seeing how they're dealing with the fact that they're both potential trade targets because they're expiring contracts, etc. But he's the guy. I think he'd be at the top of my list, actually, because knowing that the Islanders aren't going to go get Jake Gensel or something like that, right? They're gonna. So yeah, that would be just wonderful.
That would be interesting, and anything that makes Mat Barzal happy makes me happy. So we know that getting Eberle would. He has 14 goals, 33 points this year. He is a UFA. I don't know if they would bring him back as a UFA. I mean, he was making $6 million. I don't think he's going to get there at 33. Maybe he'll be 34 by that time. But yeah, that makes a lot of sense and would certainly give them a lot of flexibility up top. You could move a lot of different guys around. You could put him on a line with Nelson back at center. You could, put him. You can't play him and Barzal on the opposite wings because they both play the same position. But that would be something. I don't even think it would probably cost that much to get him. I do agree, though, that I think Wahlstrom might end up being their best option here. I know that's hopelessly naive of me because I'm sure Lou's been trying to trade this guy for probably 2 years and hasn't found a taker, but I hopefully you could find somebody on another team that you could maybe talk into taking Wahlstrom just on the potential sort of change of scenery type of thing. I don't know if Seattle would be that. I don't know if people want to trade Wahlstrom for Eberle. I would certainly be one guy that people on the Islanders fans love versus a guy who Islanders fans seem to really be very much done with for the most part. But that would give Seattle at least somebody young who they could probably do something with. I don't know. Yeah, Eberle's a good choice. Beauvillier has been hurt. He hasn't really had a great experience this season, getting traded from Vancouver to Chicago. His numbers are absolutely horrendous. I also, that would open up the same problem they had with Beauvillier the first time he was here, which is that, like, where do you put this guy? I don't know. Like, I feel like Eberle is more of a guy who has more of a defined role. He is a top 6 scorer. That's what he does, and he does it pretty well. His numbers are very, very similar to Palmieri, so you don't know if there's going to be one too many of the same type of player. But I wouldn't be against bringing Eberle back. That's for sure. My thinking, and this is gets to what you were talking about, and the one guy who I think on the Islanders really, really worries me in a playoff series. I get what you're saying. You load up on the first line and become easier to stop. Hopefully their second and third lines, who we talked about earlier, come through in a playoff series. But it's pretty clear that Matt Martin is struggling to compete and keep up. He did have a good game against the Bruins, but I don't know how confident I feel going into a playoff series with Matt Martin playing every game. And so I was thinking more of like a depth forward type. These guys aren't particularly sexy ads, but I think playing, Hudson Fasching is hurt. He's still on LTIR, except despite the fact that he played in Bridgeport. So I don't know what kind of shenanigans are going on there. Maybe Lou was waiting for the playoffs to bring him back and be like, oh, he's healthy again all of a sudden. I don't know. But anyway, I was thinking more depth guys, and I was looking around at guys who were UFAs and RFAs. And again, I don't think would cost a lot, but could fill a bottom 6 role. And a couple of guys I thought of were Dominic Kubalik, who's with Ottawa. He's a UFA. He went to Ottawa in the DeBrincat trade. He seems to not be terrible defensively. He was with I think Chicago and Detroit for a while. Peyton Krebs with Buffalo. He's an RFA. He's coming off his ELC. I don't think the Sabres are in a rush to move him, but I think he might be. He came over in the Jack Eichel trade from Vegas, so his numbers have been offensively been pretty bad this year. But I think he's a guy that they like in Buffalo, so I don't think he'd want to come here. But again, not too bad defensively. Has played in some good teams. Jason Zucker is as old as the hills, but he's a UFA out in Arizona. I think he could play a fourth or third line role and bang bodies and not give away too much. Plus, he obviously can score a little bit. We've seen him with the Penguins and stuff. And then a man who was once fixed by the Toronto Maple Leafs, Nicholas Aube-Kubel, who is currently with the Caps, is a UFA. He plays right wing, so again, he's not the same position as Martin, but again, I think he's a guy you could probably slot in your fourth line and not be too bad. And I don't think they would cost all that much, and it would give you a chance. I'm not saying Martin needs to be like waived or benched forever, but I'm saying you could put these guys in that spot next to a Kyle McLean and a Cal Clutterbuck, and I think you'd have a making of a pretty good fourth line that would probably give people a lot of trouble in the playoffs. So I don't know. What do you think about any of these guys? What do you think about like sort of depth players in general? Depth being, we know Eberle is like a top 6 guy, but I'm thinking more like bottom 6 guys. Like where are you kind of thinking? You think that's a move the Islanders might make, or maybe one of these 4 guys?
Yeah, I'd be a little Zucker to me has always been a villain in my eyes. So that would take some getting used to. But I do think like the Martin spot is to me the one the Islanders just need to address
for sure.
And whether it's just doing something as simple as playing Fasching over him or rejigging things again. But now with things going well, I don't think Wa's going to want to do too much.
Right. I just don't know what Fasching's status is. Again, he might be fine
and we don't know what Martin's is either. Like Martin got hurt, so like, and we don't know what Scott Mayfield's is either at the moment. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if Scott Mayfield ends up on LTIR with Fasching and Martin, and all of a sudden the Islanders got like $8 million of cap space or whatever it would net out to be. Not that high, but with of course, our good friend Robert Bortuzzo, who's still a New York Islander as well.
Right.
Is welcoming his former team to the to UBS Arena this week. But yeah, I think like Abe Kubel would be funny to me.
Mm.
Um, the but any of those make sense, right? Like I think that the Islanders are, if they were to, they can't really even just make room for another defenseman. Like they can't make
Mm.
even, we could make a tongue in cheek joke about like a Braden Coburn type of trade,
Right.
but they already did that with Bortuzzo. So it's like they don't, it's not even worth getting it into there unless someone goes down between now and the deadline. And so I think it's pretty clear like this team will try to make like one addition to the forward ranks, and maybe it's like like you said, it could be just a Wallstrom for X
Mm.
swap or whatever. But there, one thing I like to talk about at this time, rather, because every hockey media outlet is just going to be deadline focused. I mean, there are some that are just deadline focused for an entire year, and it's exhausting to listen to certain NHL just like rumor mongers they touch on every single player
Mm.
in the entire league, and at one point that player is, people are kicking his tires. But the conversation is always about who do you want to see on your team, and I always like to have the opposite conversation, which is who do you not want? What do you not want them to do?
Right.
And to me, Zucker kind of fits in that
Mm.
conversation because I just can't. I never liked him. I just, even though
Yeah.
the Islanders were, he's a former future Islander. Like the Islanders were trying to trade for him forever. It seemed like when he was with the Wild. But then when he was with the Penguins, he just pissed me off so much.
Yeah,
He
for
pissed me
sure.
off so much. And but to me, like I'm looking around the league and I don't want to see like the Rangers trade for someone like Casey Middlestat, who I think is pretty good. I don't
Mm.
want to see Frank Vetrano go to the Rangers again.
Yeah.
'Cause
Right.
that would piss me off. I think
Mm.
he's annoying. I want to see the Rangers go and do something dumb,
Mm.
something like annoying, and also like I know Adam Henrique I don't think would be like the perfect fit for the Rangers,
Mm.
but seeing him in a Ranger uniform, uh, all of a sudden the bit about how we want him to have a
Right.
tribute video every time he comes to the Islanders games goes out the window.
That
And
would
we love a
absolutely
good
kill me
bit,
too.
so
Yeah.
that
No.
would be tough to watch. Yeah, there's some like I don't think it's gonna happen now. It seems like Noah Hannafin is kind of said like I just want to go to one of the two Florida teams, so make it
Yeah.
happen. Um, so that would not. I don't. It doesn't seem like he's gonna end up in Toronto, but that was a little scary for a moment.
Mm.
But yeah, I don't know what else is keeping you up at night. Oh, and
Mm.
oh wait, actually, the elephant in the room is that Kyle Oposo was linked to the Rangers, which would
Yeah.
really, really be sad.
That would be sad. And I mean, I don't know why the Rangers would want Kyle Poso at this advanced age. I honestly, I'm not sure what his kind of foot speed situation is these days. We love Kyle here, but yeah, I don't know if he makes a lot of sense for anybody. And I don't think he was really in a rush to leave Buffalo. I hadn't even thought about Casey Middlestat, but you're right. He's going to be an RFA at the end of this season. It's only 25. Has good possession numbers, could probably fit in. I don't think he's a game breaker or anything. He's got good offensive numbers this year, but I hadn't thought about him. But
He would piss me off if he went to. It would be such a Rangers like break if they got him or that guy Tommy Novak, who doesn't seem like is going to move from Nashville.
yeah,
And the other guy is Pavel Buchnevich. Actually, like if the Islanders were to take a big swing, I actually would want it to be on Buchnevich.
me too. Actually, I'm glad you brought this up. So yeah, Buchnevich is a guy who's been brought around. We're going to see him again on Tuesday. It's funny how it feels like yesterday the Rangers traded him to St. Louis, and people are like, "What the fuck are you guys doing? Like this guy's good." And now all of a sudden it's like, "Well, the Blues have to trade Pavel Buchnevich because he's a UFA." So I don't really know what the story there is. If he doesn't want to sign there, or they just want to get something for him. But the problem is, I don't know if the Islanders have necessarily what the Blues would want. Now, if they want an Oliver Wahlstrom, a slightly used Oliver Wahlstrom, then sure, that's fine. We do need to talk about one other guy that keeps coming up, which is Vladimir Tarasenko, who's in Ottawa right now. I believe he had a 2-year contract there, but I guess they want to move him. He doesn't really fit the profile up there. I'm just going to come out and say it. I don't really want Vladimir. You're talking about Jason Zucker, and trust me, I agree with you. I wouldn't, it would be weird to have Zucker on the Islanders for sure. To me, this is the guy I really hope the Islanders do not get. Like his numbers are not good. He doesn't seem like he's really happy up there. I don't think he's going to be happy here too. I guess he is a little bit like Eberle in that he's a top 6 forward. He has a role. He could make the Islanders a little bit more versatile in their their top lines in particular. But I don't know. He had good numbers with the Rangers last year, his short time there, but something just bugs me about it. This isn't 5 years ago, like it would have been different. But this
Yeah.
version of Vladimir Tarasenko, I'm not sure I really want. And
Like last year, if they traded for him, it'd be a different story,
yes,
right?
right, yeah, definitely. But I think the other thing too is I feel like the Senators are going to want a lot for him, and it's like I don't want to give up a lot. If you're going to give it for a conditional pick in next year's draft or something, all right, well, fine, whatever. But like, I don't think they want to trade him for that. I think they want something good, and I don't want the Islanders to give up anything good for him. But
yeah, it's too much risk. Like
yes.
with a player like Eberle or even someone like Nicholas Aube-Kubel, there's not really much risk to it, right? Like because you're not going to put one of those guys in a role that's going to make or break some chemistry. Like the Islanders, where with a guy like Tarasenko. Well, first of all, actually, I'm glad you went there because there was all this conversation about like Islanders are sending scouts to Senators games. I used to get caught up in that like 10 years ago. Be like, oh, that's great. But now we kind of just know how the league works. Like it means nothing. Like it just means nothing that, this happens all year. And like Dave Pagnotta and the fourth period has like made a cottage industry about just like getting the scout list of certain places and just be like, there are these scouts here. And, so I don't know if there's any smoke there. I do think the Islanders and Senators make sense as a trade partner at some point with a couple of the pieces that they have. Like, but right now I just don't think it makes much sense because with a player like Tarasenko, he needs to play on the first power play unit to really bring the type of value that you want. Like you can say, okay, you stick him on that second unit instead of Engvall or whatever, or Pajot or Polak or whoever. But that second unit has actually looked all right now. Like, because as Was says, like they're the shooting unit. They just get the puck in. Engvall dumps it. They retrieve it. They get it to Polak or Riley. They shoot it, and then they just try to cause as much chaos. With Tarasenko, like he would need to play in that first unit with like a guy like Barzal setting him up. Right. And you're not going to bump Nelson or Horvat or Palmieri down with the way that they're going. So, yeah. I don't think he makes much sense right now. Because of the risk too. Like he's injury prone. He's at that shoulder. He's just not looked that great. I don't think he's, like you said, I don't think he's been that happy in Ottawa, and he's now doing the tour. I don't know if I'd want to get involved with like a guy who's on that trajectory at this point. Like if the Islanders were desperate to find another scorer, I would say, yeah, sure, like anybody at this point, but I think that their needs are a lot more subtle than that. Like they don't need a guy who can supercharge a power play like they needed this guy last year. Like they needed him to help on a power play that was 31st in the league. They're not there right now, right? So if the 2022-23 Islanders want to trade for Vladimir Tarasenko, they can go ahead and do it in a different universe. But it wouldn't really excite me as I sit here right now. Of course, when it happens, I'd find a way to get excited.
Sure. But that's a good point too. Yeah. I mean, they have needed more help on the penalty kill, although it's been pretty good this week. Again, they were actually very good. And I feel like Aube-Kubel could probably help there too, but lots of options.
That 2-for-2, they went 2-for-2 against the Red Wings, was it? Or something like that. And the Red Wings fans were irate at the officiating in that game too, which I thought was pretty funny. But that people were like, oh wow, I think Andrew Gross wrote like a story about how the penalty kill is like getting better after. I was like, they killed 2 penalties. Let's wait a little bit. It's kind of like people saying that making a big deal about Anders Lee beating out the icing last night.
Yes.
Like, all right, like look, he had a good game, but let's not turn that into like a bloody sock moment. Like he beat out an icing against a team that was like just couldn't wait to get out of the building. So it was nice. I gave Anders Lee a hearty applause for the effort, but that's the kind of stuff that we don't need to get too far into right now. Like, let's get the Islanders to win a few more games in a row before that stuff becomes like seminal moments in the season.
Yeah. I mean, if they can make their power play, if they can make their penalty kill 30th in the league out of 30, instead of 32nd, I think I'll celebrate at that point. But yeah, it was obviously good against the Bruins too. Real quick before we close up this subject. And again, I think we're both on the same page and we're not expecting a whole lot. They might not do anything. And I think, then that's going to make people really mad. Oh, what are you doing? But, it's been a wild season. And I don't, the Islanders have so many kind of weird parts, and if it's working, it's working. I think we should just kind of keep it. There's already been a lot of change. They fired their coach, and they brought in, you know, Riley, who's actually played really well, and that's where I want to get to. So Scott Mayfield is hurt right now still, and Riley and Aho are playing really well. Bortuzzo is hurt. I believe he's still on LTIR. You know, I normally, again, we could joke that they would bring in the depth defenseman. I don't think there's that many out there that they would even look at. Please, no Matt Dumba. Thank you very much. No offense, but no thanks. Ilya Lyubushkin has already been traded, so you can scratch him off the list, I guess. But you know, I just don't know what this means for Mayfield if he comes back, if he gets healthy and he comes back. I just don't know where his place is. Like, again, if they're playing well and Riley and Aho seem to have things going and the other two pairs are working as they have been before, I just don't know what that means. And then, you know, I don't know, maybe we're getting too far afield, but like, does that mean they have like a seventh defenseman signed for the next 6 years and $3.5 million per? I don't know. Or maybe they find a taker for him and get some help that way. I don't know. It's kind of a weird situation that it's in the back of my mind. It's not really connected to the trade deadline or really connected here, but
I think it kind of is, like, because we've no, like, they just haven't said anything about it.
Right. Yeah.
It kind of feels like Mayfield is in a just get yourself right situation. Like,
yeah,
something clearly he was hurt in the beginning of the year, maybe just never got over it. So
yeah, that's true too.
Because I don't remember him getting hurt before. That was it. The Dallas game that he didn't. Was it he played the last played in the Lightning game?
Yeah.
I don't remember him getting hurt in it. I don't know. It does seem a little suspicious, but I think that right now with the way that the team's going, like, you just go with Riley and Aho until you can't anymore. If, you know, when they start playing worse, but
he's a player I just kind of always assume is hurt somehow. Yeah. You know, it's like same with Clutterbuck too. Like, I just always assume that there's something wrong, and sometimes they can play through it and you wouldn't know it, and sometimes you're just like, man, what's up with that guy? And it turns out, oh, he's had a, you know, broken pinky toe for the last 6 months. Like, oh shit, well, why didn't he stop playing? You know, that kind of thing. So, but yeah, I don't know. But again, it's not necessarily connected to the trade deadline, but it's just something that's in the back of my mind. But we shall see. If some news breaks and the Islanders do make a significant trade at the deadline, we will get together and talk about it, or before the deadline. Lou Lamoriello is known to strike whenever he feels like it, so you never know. But if they make a big deal, we'll get together and talk about it. You know, Nicholas Aube-Kubel does not count. Jordan Eberle probably does. Let's put it that way. You know, we're talking about the guys that
you got to set a barometer. You got to
exactly.
Set right. Is it a you got to pull up Chris Johnston's trade board here, and that's the other thing too. Is I love that trade boards are now everybody's got their own trade board, and like, yeah, buddy, we can see who's a UFA too on Cap Friendly.
Yeah. Good job. Yeah, good job weeding through Cap Friendly.
Good.
We're gonna check with 35-year-old Frank Saravalli.
We'll see what Frank says. If Nicholas Aube-Kubel is 20th or better, then we'll do a Survivor episode, an emergency episode. If the Islanders trade for Nicholas Aube-Kubel, who, like you said, we'll have to thank the Toronto Maple Leafs for fixing him.
Yes,
along with all these other players that they fixed.
Right. Without them, he wouldn't be here. So
I do actually. I want to actually talk about the Leafs for a second, if you don't mind.
Sure.
I know we're not doing any Master Leaf theater this week, but I do think it's hilarious that the Ilya Lyubushkin trade and the discourse that came after it was basically boiled down to whether you thought the trade was good because Kyle Dubas once traded for the player, or you thought it was bad because Kyle Dubas didn't trade for this player, and it was the new GM that traded for him. Because you saw like guys like Jonas Siegel being like, this is the right fit for the Leafs. And you're like, yeah, Jonas, because Kyle Dubas once traded for this player. And then you saw other guys who were in the Dubas camp who were like, like this is a terrible move. It makes the Leafs worse. And you're like, yeah, I know. And you're saying that because Kyle Dubas didn't trade for him this time. If Kyle Dubas was the one who was trading for him again, you'd be like, oh, what Dubas sees here, he doesn't look at your player cards. He sees his own stuff. And but it was great discourse. I was really happy to see that the Maple Leafs traded for him because I was getting a little nervous that they were gonna get a good player. And and then he
Yeah.
gets hurt, like I said, from Rempe right away, which was, we don't root for injuries on the show. We can never be accused of rooting for injuries, but it was, kind of the timing of it was funny, let's say. But
Yeah.
I'll be losing a lot of sleep this week thinking about what them and the Rangers are going to do, and I'm counting the minutes to Jake Gensel getting traded out of Pittsburgh, man. Like that's going to be as long as he goes to one of not those two teams. If he goes to like Colorado or Edmonton or whatever,
I don't think they could fit him even if they
I
wanted
don't know whoever ends up getting him, as long as it's not Pittsburgh, Toronto or the Rangers, I'm just going to be but because we say, oh, we don't know if the Rangers can't make that move. Of course they can. The salary cap just doesn't exist. Like when when they were talking about Elias Pettersson, maybe being traded, I'm like, great, so he's going to end up on the Rangers, and people are like, how is that possible? How can the Rangers do it? Like, how is that possible? He could do what Artemi Panarin and Jacob Trouba and Adam Fox and Blake Wheeler or whoever or Tarasenko, they all did. And they're like, oh, I want to be traded, and I only want to go to one team. So you got to make that happen.
Well, Pettersson apparently was almost a Carolina Hurricane, according to Elliot Friedman. So that would have been almost as bad, frankly. It would have been maybe one shade less bad than going to the Rangers. But yeah, you're right. The salary cap definitely doesn't exist for these two. But I don't even know if they're looking at a Gensel. I would think, Vegas seems to be the kind of the top end, spot for him. And that would be funny. And then I've also seen maybe they could trade Riley Smith back to Vegas, because he's going to be a UFA. And I was like, what happened to the Renaissance painting? What happened to this guy who was Kyle Dubas's big get over the summer? I guess it didn't work out.
But he gets traded. It's going to be a lot of fun when Riley Smith gets traded. That tweet is just, I can't wait.
So again, I was out Saturday night. My wife and I were seeing Batman in concert. Islanders win. Show was absolutely great. It's one of my favorite movies ever. Seeing it with a live orchestra is even better. Come home. And I'm looking at the scoreboard. I watched the recap real quick of the Islanders. The scoreboard shows that the Calgary Flames are playing the Penguins, and they're down 3-1 in the third. And I'm like, well, I guess what are you going to do? The Flames storm back and tie the game and win in regulation on a turnover by Chris Letang, who was so mad he smashed his stick over the net on the pipe and stuff. And if you have not watched it, I beg you, go back and watch it, because it is fantastic. I love it.
I woke up this morning. I went to bed. The Penguins were up 3-1. I was like, you know what? I don't want to spoil a good night. Let's just call it a night. We'll go to bed. And I've been having dreams about the out of town scoreboard, which happens. Like I bet a lot of tennis, and a lot of times when tennis is on the other side of the world, like I'll be watching an Australian Open match, or for example, and I'll dream about the match and see the final score in my dream, be like, oh man, Gael Monfils, I bet on Gael Monfils and he lost. And then I'll wake up in the morning thinking that actually happened. So I went to bed and dreamt that the Penguins won 7-1. They just piled it on. So I woke up and I didn't realize for the first hour, I didn't check the score. And I finally opened up the app. I'm like, I dreamt that the Penguins won. I didn't actually check it in real life. And I saw it. And then I thought, oh, maybe I'm actually having a dream now that they lost 4-3 in regulation. But no, because this Penguins team has been a dream the past couple seasons. So
fantastic.
It's been great.
Yeah, I highly recommend it. Calgary, I got to get to a game in Calgary one of these days. The place is going absolutely bonkers. The play-by-play guy is going bonkers. It was a lot of fun. Yeah, it was great. It was awesome. So check it out. We'll have to there's a lot going on. And like I said, we'll be back if they make a big trade, and hopefully, none of our enemies make big trades and get better. The Lyubushkin thing was very funny because he's one of the worst players in the league by data points, and you have all these guys sort of bending over backwards talking about what a perfect fit he is, and then getting old tweets thrown in their face, and then they reply with, that was 2 years ago. It's like, okay, well, I don't know what, he wasn't that good yet then
either. That was a
but
different GM, okay?
Yeah, right. So it's hilarious. Check it out for sure. Leafs fans also beefing with ex-refs, which is also a fun
that's
Sunday.
been fun.
Yeah. So
those poor Maple Leafs, man. The refs really got it out for him.
Yeah, yeah, sure. Those guys, they never catch any breaks. That's for sure. But yeah, so it's a busy week, man. Clear your calendars, keep your eyes open. It's gonna be wild.
It's a fun week. This week would have been miserable.
Oh my God. Yeah.
If the Islanders didn't do, if they had won 1 and 2, like I would have been like, oh my, I'm just waking up every morning praying that Brock Nelson doesn't get traded today. And now I'm like, oh my God, they might get Jordan Eberle. Like
Yeah.
they might get Nicholas Kubel might.
Yeah.
I think there was a Luke Fox jukebox tweet from, and I'd have to go back and do some digging that I shouldn't do right now because we're up against it. But I'm pretty sure when he had his first preseason game, or it might have even been like an inter-squad scrimmage with the Leafs in his camp there, and Luke Fox jukebox was like, "This guy's going to be a fan favorite," and he was waived like a week and a half later.
That's how it goes. Well, I mean, he'd already been fixed, so his time with the Leafs was done. So, but yeah, so it's gonna be a crazy week. Keep your ears open, keep your eyes open, and we'll be here all the way. We'll see what happens, and if something big happens, we'll get together. One final note before we close this episode up. I want to say a few words about Claire Arbour, who passed away a little while ago. They mentioned her on the broadcast against the Bruins. You may have seen some things get out on social media earlier this week. Claire was more than just the coach's wife, obviously married to Al Arbour for a very, very, very long time. Claire is actually a very, very underrated and unheralded aspect of Islanders hockey. You know, we talk a lot about Al and Bill Torrey, obviously building the dynasty from within, but Claire was instrumental in a lot of ways that I don't know if people really understand. Al was one of the first coaches to use video to take books, basically make huge books on other players and other teams. And this was in the early and mid 70s when VCRs were not in every home in America. And while Al was out coaching the Islanders, who do you think was at home recording the games? It was Claire. That was one of her duties, was to do that. And she did it and helped Al, record those games and take stock of all the players and teams around the league. But also, she was instrumental in welcoming the players' wives and their families to Long Island. And she helped, keep Al aware of different things that are going on. Maybe the players didn't want to talk to him about, but if somebody, was having a baby, or somebody had some family in town, or had some maybe personal issues going on, or things weighing on them, Claire would find out from the wife, and she would get back to Al. And it was done not in a spying kind of way, but in a way so that Al could better understand his players, because as we know, they felt he was sort of a surrogate father figure to a lot of them, and he cared about people, and he wanted to know more about them. And listen, sometimes we're all the same. Sometimes we just don't want to talk to our boss about our innermost anxieties. Claire helped Al find out about that stuff and helped him relate to the players more, which obviously translated into great success. So Claire will be missed. She was a great lady by all accounts. Stan Fischler wrote at the Hockey News that he had talked to Claire and Al about working on a book about their life in hockey, and they both sort of politely declined. And man, I kind of wish that book had existed, because I would be the first person to read it. May she rest in peace alongside her husband. And we thank her for everything. And our condolences go out to the Arbour family and extended family. Okay, that'll wrap it up for this episode. We'll be back again next Wednesday, so adjust your calendars accordingly, and maybe earlier, depending on what happens at the trade deadline. Sign up at patreon.com/Islanders Anxiety for ad-free episodes and bonus content. Again, great episode with Desmond from Through the Island about kind of unsticking the Islanders' salary cap situation. Follow us at Isles Anxiety Pod. Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts and at Spotify. Our theme song is Morning Haze by Family Dinner. So learn more about that. Listen to more of their music at Bandcamp and at Spotify. We Lighthouse Hockey every single day. We are part of the Fans First Sports Network. Learn more at fansfirstsports.com. And it is March, which means we are less than 1 month away from our first ever live event at the Offside Tavern in New York City. March 30th, Saturday, 4 p.m. Be there. It's going to be great. We're going to record people's Weird Islanders stories for an episode of the show. The Islanders Anxiety Club patches have gone out to Country Club tier subscribers. Tons of people are getting them. I got mine. Mike got his. And they are absolutely fantastic. I love them. I love staring at them. I love holding them and picking them up and touching them. It's such a cool thing. And we have some that are available for purchase at vintageicehockey.com. So if you're not a patron and you didn't want to sign up, that's totally cool. I get it. If you want a patch, you can get one at vintageicehockey.com. They are very limited, though. I'm talking about like we had 40 or 50 left over. So if we want one, don't wait, go get one. And they are absolutely awesome. And if you have one and are coming to the live event, I want to see them. So let's get them sewn onto those shirts, backpacks, whatever you got. Let's see you. Get your mom or your mother-in-law, whoever, local seamstress to do it, your tailor or whatever, to make it happen. I want to see them. They're awesome. Also try Wines from the Pinot Project. Check out Foco's Stadium Series bobbleheads at sale now. Mike, where can everybody find you on Twitter?
The Big Lebowski with 2 E's.
Follow Mike at the Big Lebowski. Read and listen to his work at Action Network, which I'm sure is also going to be very, very busy place this week with the trade deadline coming up. Any final thoughts on the Islanders' upcoming games in California, or who might be on the team when we next speak for Islanders Anxiety?
Yeah, I mean, I'm desperate now to do an emergency episode on Nicholas Aube-Kubel, but outside of that, no.
You've created a monster.
I know. Outside of that, I'm just very grateful that the Islanders have given us another week of meaningful hockey, and that week happens to be the trade deadline. So, you're part of the dance here, the song and dance. It's fun. I mean, we poo-poo the way that hockey media is these days, but I mean, we're still hockey nerds, and we'll be reading everything and listening to everything, and getting excited about trade rumors and all that. It's a fun time to be a fan. It's maybe one of my favorite weeks to be a fan, and it's even more so when the Islanders are still in it. So at least one more meaningful game left in the season, and hopefully on Tuesday they earn themselves a couple more with a win, and we can go into the deadline with some intrigue.
Yes, it's gonna be crazy. This is gonna be a momentous week, regardless of what happens. So we'll talk again next week, see where it all shakes out. We're gonna keep our fingers crossed and our ears open, and maybe the Islanders come out on the other side even closer to a playoff spot. Thanks again for listening. We'll be back again soon, and until then, take care. Talk to you later.